So integrity is right living on a regular basis. Let's look at another definition of integrity in Daniel 6, verse 10. Now at this point, these guys trying to turn the king against Daniel, they've got the king to pass a law that no one can worship anyone or anything except that king for 30 days. And so they go and talk to the king. And in Daniel 6, verse 10, this law is passed. It says, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So Daniel got caught doing what he was told he wasn't supposed to do. Second definition of integrity, it is right living despite circumstances. Right living despite circumstances. Now, here these guys are trying to trap Daniel, and they know that the best way to do that is to turn the law against Daniel's faith in some way. They know Daniel is such a man of integrity, he's going to continually worship his God no matter what. So they convince the king to pass this law that no one can worship anything except the king for 30 days. And I imagine that the king, my guess is the king is a little egocentric, and they probably knew this, and these guys wanted to take advantage of it. They probably went up to him and said, hey king, you know what, you are just great, you know that? You are the greatest king ever. You know what we should do? We should make sure everybody knows how great you are. So let's pass this law. And the king, probably being a little self-centered, said, yeah, you're right. I am really great, aren't I? That's a good idea. Let's pass this law and make sure everybody knows how great I am. And so the king passes this edict, and it's the type of edict that even if the king wants to repeal it, he can't. It can never be repealed once it's passed. And the punishment for this, for going against this type of edict, is to be thrown into the lion's den. Now we may think, so what? It doesn't say Daniel has to worship the king, it just tells him not to worship God. Well, it does tell him he can't worship God, and Daniel has too much integrity to stop worshiping his God, even if it's only for a short while. But you know, that punishment, the fear of that punishment did not sway Daniel at all. He still did it, he still got caught, but it would not be integrity if it were depending on circumstances. Integrity is completely devoid of circumstance. People understood that exact concept with Christ. In Matthew 22, verse 16, we read that some of the Pharisees, the guys who are trying to trap Jesus, they send their disciples to him to question him and try to trap him. And they go to him and they say, Teacher, we know you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by men because you pay no attention to who they are. Even though these people trying to trap Jesus are not very good people, they understand something about integrity. The Pharisees, the teachers of the law, the people in this time hated Jesus for what he taught. But he did not care, because it wasn't a matter of what other people thought. It was a matter of teaching the truth. Integrity is devoid of circumstance. You know, a person can be a good person. They can help out people all the time, do good things, do community service, seek to do the good to all other people. But if they don't do those things when they're encountered with some type of opposition, they don't have real integrity. And we have a word for people who do that. We call them yes men. You know, I'll always stand up for what's right, unless my boss tells me to do otherwise. I will always tell the truth, unless it's going to make somebody mad at me. You know, I will always stick to my promises, unless it's going to be difficult later on to stick to them, then I don't have to. You know, we live in a world where circumstances don't always favor the godly, and integrity becomes obvious because of that. In Proverbs 29:10, we're told, bloodthirsty men hate a man of integrity and seek to kill the upright. And it happens every single day. An honest person works hard, pays all their taxes, gives generously, while dishonest people embezzle and cheat and lie and steal, and they take part in insider trading, and they get rich as a result of it. Bosses ask you to be honest on some or dishonest on some reports in hopes that it'll make their company look better. Maybe your in-laws call and your spouse tells you to tell them that they're not home. You ever been there? Internet pornography promises that nobody is going to find out. And people promise that if you'll just go along with the opinion of others and do what most people prefer, then you'll be liked and you'll be a favored person. But really, to be people of integrity, we have to do what's right no matter what the consequences may be of that. One of the best examples of integrity I've ever seen in my entire life, I think, was probably my father-in-law. A couple months ago, he chipped his tooth. I don't know how he chipped his tooth. He didn't know how he chipped his tooth. It just noticed a piece of his tooth was missing one day. But it was okay. They had good dental insurance. So he called his insurance company and said, I have a chipped tooth. I'm going to have it fixed. They said, sure, no problem. We can fix it, but you got to tell us how you chipped it. He said, I don't know how I chipped it. They said, what do you mean you don't know how you chipped it? It's chipped. Did you fall down? Did you bump your head? What happened? He said, I don't know. It's just chipped. They said, well, we can't cover it unless you know how it was chipped. He said, I'm sorry, I still don't know how it was chipped. And, all that time it would have been so easy for him to just make up and say, oh yeah, I did bump my head or bumped my tooth on something or ate something really hard and it chipped it and I just forgot about it at the time. But yeah, that's how it happened. It'd be really easy for him to make something up, but he refused to. And so he had to pay for it out of pocket. It ended up being something like $5,000 out of pocket to fix a chipped tooth because he wouldn't make up something that he didn't know for sure. Now, I know his integrity is worth at least $5,000. How much do you think your integrity is worth? Really, what it comes down to is knowing where your commitment is. What are you committed to? Are you committed to being comfortable, being a good person up until maybe it'll make you uncomfortable or until you receive a pay decrease or you're insulted for your faith? Are you going to be committed up to that point? Or are you going to be entirely committed to God? Think about what is most important to you, because real commitment and real integrity has nothing to do with circumstance. So we know that integrity is right living on a regular basis, and it's right living despite circumstance or consequence. And now let's look at one more definition of what integrity is. In Daniel 6, verse 22, Daniel was thrown into the lion's den for worshiping God. The king didn't want him to, but he got thrown in anyway. And the next morning the king rushes to see if Daniel's still alive and see if he's okay. And in Daniel 6:22, he calls down to Daniel, and Daniel answers him. He says, my God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done anything wrong before you, O king. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Last definition of integrity I want to look at. It's right living in God's sight. True integrity is the kind of thing that pleases God. Now, Daniel's thrown into the lion's den. Somehow, he survives. The king calls to him the next day, and Daniel says, I'm okay because I was innocent in God's sight. Now that's important. It's in God's sight. God protected a man of true integrity because integrity is holding to what pleases God. But from the perspective of his government, the government he was working for, Daniel was not a good person. Daniel was a lawbreaker. Daniel went against the country and the king that he has sworn to serve. He's not a good person. But that doesn't matter, because real integrity is not based on the definition of any humanly organization. Real integrity is based on God's law. Basically, integrity is what pleases God, what's right in his sight. In 1 Chronicles 29:17, it says, I know, my God, that you test the heart and are pleased with integrity. When we consistently pursue the things that honor God, that he sees as right, that is when we become people of integrity. In the Nuremberg trials, immediately after World War II, I think I've told this story before, but it illustrates so much and it teaches us so much. Several Nazi officers were held on trial for the murder of Jews in the concentration camps. And when it came time to give their defense, the defense they gave was very true, very accurate. They said, yes, we killed those people, but we were just following orders. In other words, from the perspective of their country and their leaders, these murderers were good men. They were citizens of integrity in their country's eyes because they did what they were supposed to. They did what was asked of them. They served their country. But they were still found guilty because they failed to recognize that there is a higher law above any law that any government could pass or could ordain. You see, the real definition of integrity is God's law and what God sees as right. To be people of integrity, we have to know what God sees as right. We have to pursue it, and that only comes by a relationship with God. So to start off, we should pursue those things that honor God and that build a relationship with him. And from there, it's just a matter of understanding Him more and drawing closer to Him. And I think we can really say to a degree that God rewards integrity too. He protected Daniel because of his integrity. In Psalm 41:12, David writes, "In my integrity you uphold me and set me in your presence forever." Now, God doesn't promise that if we're people of integrity, we're going to have an easy life with no problems. Maybe we'll see good things result from it, but maybe not. Even if we don't, there are still rewards for it. There's rewards of a peace of mind, peace of heart, peace with God, and there's rewards of eternal life for our complete dedication to God and fully following Him. So, to review, integrity is right living on a regular basis. It's right living despite any circumstances, and it's right living in God's sight, what God sees as good. To do those things is to be a person of integrity. But really, when we do that, we're just being consistent. You see, our faith tells us what is right. Our integrity tells us to follow our faith. All we're doing is following what God expects of us. Integrity is just what God expects of us. And that's just what He would have us to be, is people of integrity.